welcome to the stage Mr. Giuseppe Saba, CEO of the International Humanitarian City, UAE, to speak on the topic of the UN SDGs, a greater urgency with higher stakes. Appointed as CEO of Dubai's International Humanitarian City in early March 2017, Giuseppe Saba brings more than 36 years of extensive experience in the humanitarian field with the United Nations as well as international organizations. He is the founder of the United Nations Humanitarian Response Depot Network, UNHRD, and in 2000, he set up, under the UN World Food Programme, the first UNHRD in Brindisi, southeast of Italy, as a consortium of UN agencies and international humanitarian organizations. Please welcome Giuseppe Saba. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Sally, and thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. It's an opportunity for the International Humanitarian City to create further awareness. I believe that this is extremely important because the humanitarian activities usually are not always on the first page of any news or newspaper. So thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely. They're not on the first page, but unfortunately they're some of the most important that we need to be looking at. And so with regards to the UN 17 SDGs, what are the ways that you see to optimize partnerships to fulfill the SDG objectives in the post-COVID-19 world?
Well, if I should look the past 35 years of my life, substantially what driven me was substantially the partnership. Partnership is not absolutely an option. Partnership is a must within the humanitarian field. Now, you mentioned in your introduction that I'm the founder of the UNHRD network. UNHRD network is lessons learned from the Southeast Asia tsunami, where we realized that for responding to emergencies having so large scale, we need to adopt a totally different approach. You even mentioned that I created the UNHRD network as a consortium. Now, call it consortium or partnership, but we are still there in the sense that alone we cannot do nothing. And the first, let me say, part of my life where I dedicated to the UNHRD when I used to work for the United Nations World Food Programme, it was a partnership among the humanitarian community. But since I joined the International Humanitarian City, I have to admit that in Dubai, they went really beyond. And I had, if I should compare with my original idea of partnership, because in Dubai what's happened is that within the International Humanitarian City has been created a platform which is collocating together the humanitarian community, the humanitarian organization, the big players, the medium players, small players. And you know very well,
yes,
because you are a fan of the Fredolo's Foundation. So, and again, but if you look into the IHC platform, we have also the private sector. We have the companies, commercial companies, logistics companies, which are conducting a humanitarian business related. And let me say clearly, the fact that are collocated together, the humanitarians and the commercial companies, is not because we intend to facilitate the job of the commercial companies or of the logistics companies. We recognized in the private sector in the commercial companies, a strong partnership that we need. We are extremely good in the humanitarian field, doing our job, but whenever we are going to encounter a challenge in the field, we don't know absolutely how to solve. Just the Vice Minister was saying how are important the technologies. And the technologies are ordered by the commercial companies, are ordered by the private sector. So we need them. So means that going back to your original question, what we can do. First of all, we have to keep in mind that our partners, when we look at the private sector, when we look at foundation, when we look at the philanthropists and so on, they don't want anymore to be treated as a donor. They are not an ATM machine where you are going to ask to release a check or to release a contribution. They want to be extremely proactive into the humanitarian field, to become humanitarian workers as us, and to work together with us, and to deliver together with us. This is the really new and big change that I noted within the partners that I'm more and more getting around me.
Mm. And so to that, you know, looking at the private sector wanting to increase their ability to have an impact, how do you actually increase private sector participation in humanitarian projects, particularly around issues relating to education, for example? Well,
most probably that is the easiest of the answer, the question that you're asking me, and I explain you the reason behind. In the past 24 months, the private sector was knocking continuously the door of the International Humanitarian City, always with the same question: how can we help the humanitarian community? And trust me, I'm talking about for the excellence of the logistics companies operating in Dubai and in the UAE. Just to mention some of them, for example, the Emirates Sky Cargo, they opened a big air bridge into 10 cities in India in order to move free of charge humanitarian aid. I believe that everybody remember also, unfortunately, the blast in Beirut, in Lebanon. Also there, it has been really a private sector operation, not only and exclusively from the multilateral or from the big organization. The private sector did its own part. But when we talk about education, even the universities are knocking the door. We started in creating partnership with, for example, the Wollongong University here in the UAE, because whenever you ask to a young student who want to embrace the humanitarian work, is going to tell you that there is no access to the humanitarian study in this part of the world, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia. We are obliging the student to go into Europe or into the United States. So this is our first message when we talk about education. Then we have plenty of programs such as the Waterfall that we are doing in cooperation with TIAD and so on, which is another large part of the education. But if I should look even into our community, even this morning I had a long meeting with the new CEO of SOS Children, and they are basically doing education around the world. For those that have familiarity with the World Food Program, come on, again, when we talk about school feeding, exactly we are talking about education. When we look on the amazing job that is doing UNHCR in the refugee camps, again, there is a large part of the education. But I do not intend absolutely minimize the job that are doing a lot of our members and partners that are hosted within the International Humanitarian City, and they are part of our community. We have approximately more than 80 members within the International Humanitarian City, 500 people working all together within the city, 500 citizens, to which I would like to minimize their own experience in 10 years. 500 per 10 years, we are talking about 5,000 years of experience. Really, we have to lose all of this knowledge, all of this experience. Is a must again to transfer this knowledge, even to share this knowledge with the future humanitarian workers, with the future humanitarian leaders. And this is the most important message. Let us look into the youth. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the milestones of the IHC in the last 2 years of the pandemic, in terms of the challenges as well, and how the IHC served as a platform for the delivery of humanitarian services in such a critical and an important way.
Well, let me give you a couple of figures. IHC has been established in 2003. It was located behind the Burj Khalifa, a very prime location, but later on moved in 2011 into the Dubai Industrial City and assigned into 90,000 square meters, triple sites. As you said, I came into the picture in 2017. Today, we are using 140,000 square meters of space between offices and warehouses. A couple of days ago, I had the visit of Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization. And I was showing to Dr. Tedros the dashboard, our dashboard, which is a humanitarian logistics data bank. It's quite a very innovative approach that we use together with our community. We mapped more than 5,000 line items, which are the humanitarian aid that are most frequently used during the emergency response. And with the support of the customs, we are detecting the customs transaction associated with the identification code of a company, also the humanitarian organization, they are considered a company. So it means that cross-checking the data related to the company and the line items that they are moving, automatically we know exactly which is the stock prepositioned moving in and moving out of Dubai. Well, 4 years ago, the total stock of the humanitarian community seated in Dubai was approximately $43 million, out of which $3-4 million was represented by the health cluster, less than 10%. If today you are going to open the dashboard, and this is an information that is accessible to everybody, to tap into the IHC website, we will see that we are, at least 2 days ago, during the visit of Dr. Tedros, the maximum stock was $140 million. But what was surprising, not me, Dr. Tedros, is that the 50% of the stock seated into the International Humanitarian City are represented by health. What does it mean for us? 2 things. First of all, wake up, because you need to change totally your approach. You need to diversify your situation into the warehouse. More temperature control warehouse, a strong, let's say, cold chain in order to move medicine, medical supplies, vaccines, and so on. And in fact, this is what we did. We created and we expanded our cold chain. We increased with 8 cold rooms for vaccines and other medical supplies. We established immediately a kitting center because I believe that everybody knows now and today what is a PPE kit, which is a personal protection equipment, and this is our capacity today and the support that we are providing to our community in order to even produce kits into the IHC facilities. So this growth also dictated to us another big change to create a center of excellence for the health logistics. And again, I'm coming back to the, let me say, the capacity building training. And this should help not only and exclusively the colleagues seated in Dubai, but even into other humanitarian hubs. The challenge is, well, if you consider that the growth of the stocks automatically means also the growth of the dispatches. Last year, we dispatched 1,200 shipments, $140 million, serving more than 130 countries. This is something that is unbelievable. But again, we were not absolutely serving only and exclusively for the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic didn't stop earthquakes, didn't stop the other natural disasters, other emergencies, or the conflict zones. No, also those emergencies were going on, and we were, of course, it's our job to respond to both the emergencies. This year, looking the data 2 days ago, again, we are close to the same data of last year. 115 countries, 1,100 shipments, $115 million of stocks dispatched. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the challenges, because the challenges that were mentioned by the Vice Minister for Transport of Saudi Arabia are exactly that. We encounter a collapse of the supply chain. And when you have a collapse of the supply chain, especially when the main part and the large part of the humanitarian aid are manufactured in Southeast Asia, because the huge production is in China, Malaysia, in India, in Pakistan. Those are the areas where are manufactured the humanitarian aid. And when you have a collapse of the supply chain, because many of the aircrafts were grounded, the transport, even via sea, it was substantially reduced drastically. Well, there you have only one option: to get a strong partnership with government especially which are well equipped with air military assets, and they are going to support you. This is what we got. This is what even UAE offered to the United Nations by making available a C-17 plus other aircrafts in order to continue to provide and to split humanitarian aids worldwide. And apart, let me say, this was more a support related to the multilateral action. But everybody, I'm pretty sure, knows how UAE did quite a lot of bilateral support during the high peaks of the COVID-19 pandemic. Myself, as Italian, I saw an aircraft sent from UAE, landing in Rome, plenty of humanitarian aid. That was the life, because I believe that we saw quite a lot of well-developed countries looking for support. That is the reality, and this is the effect of the COVID, that didn't distinguish absolutely a poor country from a medium or richest country of this world.
Yes, exactly. It was absolutely extraordinary seeing the support that was provided, as you say, by the UAE to other countries like Italy at the height of the critical moments of the pandemic. And so to that, I'm going to ask you a question, and we are taking questions from the audience. We have a great one that's coming from Alia, which we will get to in just a moment. But I'm going to ask you about, to that point, how the UAE can actually serve as an example to other nations in the field of humanitarian delivery.
I believe that International Humanitarian City should be considered a sort of model.
Yes.
A model, I don't like to talk about export a model. Let me say sharing the model, sharing our best practices. And what we did together with our community and with the colleagues of the International Humanitarian City is that we mapped worldwide 11 humanitarian hubs, which are hosting stocks for responding to international calamities and emergencies. Now, if you look in many countries, I know that you have, and here we have a very interesting audience in Asia. I spent some time in Asia. I supported the humanitarian office of ASEAN for identifying exactly into the ASEAN community mechanism, logistics mechanism for responding quickly to the emergency. Unfortunately, Southeast Asia is frequently affected by natural disasters. For those that have familiarity, they know very well, from drought to volcano eruptions, tsunamis, earthquakes, and so on. The fire forest, there's quite a lot of natural disasters into the Southeast Asia. Sorry, I used to continue to call them natural disasters, but it's relatively true in the sense that more and more we have to start in talking about climate change and instead of natural disasters.
Man-made disasters, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I have always difficult to put them in between the man-made disasters and the natural disasters. But anyway, the great response in Southeast Asia is that there is a lot of preparedness there. And they are, let me say, able to get a good preparation at country level. Now, whenever you have a stock preposition for a country, is not going to leave that country. That is the reason why we prefer to map the humanitarian hubs that are responding to international appeals. And I can tell you that if you start from Brisbane in Australia, passing through China in Queens, you pass through Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur, in Dubai, then in Jordan, then in Cameroon, Kenya, Ghana, Italy, Spain, and Panama, you will see that those 11 humanitarian hubs need to start in talking together. Because then, if we're starting in liaising among ourselves, to cooperate among ourselves, then our humanitarian action is going to become much more cost-effective.
Absolutely, and it kind of speaks to the question that we did get from Adia, saying, is it possible for the global humanitarian community to be brought to one platform and work towards the common goals of the SDGs? That's a question from Alia.
This is not an option. The humanitarian community must work together. Sometimes I used to complain that still, frequently we used to say that we should work. I'm still convinced to be part of the UN, but we should work as one UN. But it's still a sort of slogan. I would love to see really all the colleagues from the UN working all together as one UN, but even the humanitarian community working as one humanitarian community and delivering together as one. We are talking about, again, partnership. Here, there is no way that we can get out. If we want to succeed with the SDGs, we need to work together. This is not, there is no any special organization which is mandated in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Each one of us has to contribute, and this depends only exclusively by us.
There is another question that's come in from Khadija, which is a brilliant one as well. But before we get to it, I want to ask you about the role of the IHC in bringing leaders from the corporate sector and government together to bridge the gap between the developing and the developed world. Can you speak more to that?
Well, again, if I should take those 11 hubs that I just mentioned, from my own perspective as a CEO of the International Humanitarian City, a tool which is largely dedicated to the emergency preparedness and response. Well, I believe that we should build up exactly a sort of network of those countries, first of all, that are hosting the 11 humanitarian hubs, to encourage them to work together for a common approach and to include into this platform the private sector. Again, we don't need to encourage the private sector. The private sector wants strongly to be part of the humanitarian field. They want to be part of the humanitarian community. They intend to work together with the humanitarian community. The most important part for me, this is my point of view, they don't want to be treated as a donor. Treat them as an integrative part, as a very proactive donor. There is no any more donors that want to play a passive role. No, I'm engaged. I will continue to engage myself. I want to participate. So to be really proactive, not absolutely a passive donor. This is, I believe, the best way. Then, honestly speaking, I cannot have a receipt or a solution for everything. But this is the fundamental of the partnership. If we are working together, we can achieve quite a lot.
Yes, for sure. And so let's get to Khadija's question from Abu Dhabi. She says, in one of your interviews, you've spoken about creating a humanitarian logistics data bank. Can you talk about its purpose and how it functions? And I believe we have this data bank at IHC, and it is truly extraordinary. I have seen it in action. It's amazing.
Yes, that was exactly what I was mentioning before. When during the visit of the Director General of WHO, we were able to provide him with information that are now related to the past 5 years. I was talking with Noor a few minutes before starting the session, and correctly said, you have plenty of data. Now you have to read them appropriately. Yeah. You need to read them in a manner that are going to be really your driver in the future. Because that logistics data bank, which again, it's really an innovative approach that we used. For those that are familiar with the logistics, they know that theoretically you can get the same information from a warehouse management system. I'm one of those who was trying to achieve this objective since 25 years ago. But 25 years ago, most probably we used to have just the emails, nothing more. And today, to see that we can capture all of those information through the customs transactions and to get a very strong cooperation, and again, I'm talking about partnership with customs, with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with all of our members that are prepositioned in humanitarian aid. This is a tool that if he is in the hands, for example, of a prime minister or head of the civil protection in a country where during the night is going to happen an earthquake or any other disaster, unfortunately, whoever is taking the responsibility for assisting the population and is in the need of getting international appeal, is obliged to call the UN resident coordinator, that is usually a diplomat. And the UN resident coordinator is going to call each different organization. So means that if you need to get information, you need to wait days. And today, this is something that is not acceptable, because in a click, you know exactly what is seated in Dubai. And tomorrow, my hope is to get exactly the same information from the other 10 countries that I mentioned before. Try to imagine into the same humanitarian logistics data bank, all of those information, and the Prime Minister in Honduras is not going to call IHC Dubai, is going to call Panama, or from the Pacific Islands, they are going to look immediately into the component related to the Brisbane in Australia or in Kuala Lumpur and so on, because this is exactly the kind of information that we need to start in sharing among ourselves. And that kind of information is going to tell us exactly what I was mentioning before. We need to diversify our storage capacity, to increase the cold chain, to create much more space for vaccines instead of shelter or something else. This is the power of the information and what we can read exactly.
Yes.
Of course, Noor was talking about intelligence on this, and I cannot absolutely disagree, but I believe that this is the future. Yeah. We need to use the technologies, yes, and the technologies should help us tremendously in the future humanitarian assistance.
It is vital. It is one thing to say, we have a disaster here, we need help. It is a whole other thing to be able to know exactly where resources are coming from, how fast they're going to get there, what you still need, and to not be asking, for other resources that are, that are already coming through, that all of this information can be seen at you, as you said, basically at the click of a button. But Giuseppe, I want to thank you so much.
Let me add just a point. We are in a country, okay, where really we can develop quite a lot of projects.
Yes.
We have the good luck of having leaders able to look ahead for years and years. And when I think about this idea of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed in establishing the International Humanitarian City, or nobody most probably knows, but frequently His Highness Sheikh Mohammed is making available air assets, private, for moving humanitarian stocks. My last flight was into Sudan recently with some of the media. We landed in Khartoum. We offloaded the aircraft. It was supposed to continue with other rotations, but unfortunately, a few hours later, we had the military coup in Sudan. But this gives you the sense that how this country is really willing and investing in order to assist the population in it. That is something that is, I believe, on the base of all of the successes of the International Humanitarian City. And thanks to the leaders, honestly speaking, for allowing us to do this great job.
This is where it all starts, isn't it? With the vision of the leadership of this country. And we do thank His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum for not only establishing IHC, but for the continuous incredible support that he does give. And I want to thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Giuseppe Saba, CEO of the IHC. And now, ladies and gentlemen.